The autumn of 1888 was a time of fear in London. In the East End, in a district called Whitechapel, a killer was at work. He targeted poor women, prostitutes mostly, and he killed them with a terrible violence that shocked everyone. The papers called him a monster, a fiend, but soon he got a name. A letter arrived at a news agency. It was written in red ink, it was full of taunts and boasts, and it was signed Jack the Ripper. That name stuck. It was catchy, theatrical. It sounded like something from a penny dreadful novel. The police and the press were flooded with letters after that. Hundreds of them. Most were cruel jokes. People trying to get attention, to be part of the story. They were hoaxes, written by bored clerks or journalists trying to sell more papers. The police had to sort through them all. It was a huge waste of time. They mostly ignored them. The Dear Boss letter, the one that gave him his name, was probably a fake. The Saucy Jackie postcard that followed it, also probably a fake. They were clever, but they offered nothing that only the killer would know. They were just words. Then something different arrived. It wasn't sent to the police. It wasn't sent to a newspaper. It was sent to a man named George Lusk. Lusk was a local builder. He was the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. This was a group of local businessmen and residents. They were frustrated with the police. They felt the investigation was going nowhere. So they organized their own patrols. They hired private detectives. They were trying to protect their community and catch the killer themselves. Lusk was their leader. He was a public face of the hunt for the Ripper. On October 16, 1888, Lusk received a small cardboard box in the mail. It was about 3 inches square. The postmark was from London. Inside the box, packed in cotton wool, was a piece of an organ. And a letter. The letter was short, it was badly written, full of spelling and grammar mistakes. From hell. Mr. Lusk swore, quote, "I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you t'other piece. I fried and ate. It was very nice." They didn't know what to do. At first, they thought it was a sick joke. A medical student's prank, maybe. They thought the kidney might be from a dog or some other animal. They were about to throw it away. But something made them hesitate. The situation was too serious. They decided they had to take it to a doctor. The first doctor they saw, Dr. Frederick Wiles, wasn't sure. He suggested they take it to Dr. Thomas Openshaw at the London hospital. Dr. Openshaw was a pathologist. He knew what he was looking at. He examined the object carefully. His conclusions were chilling. First, it was a human kidney, not an animal. Second, it was the upper part of the left kidney. Third, it had been preserved in spirits of wine, probably gin, for a few days. This had kept it from rotting completely. Fourth, the piece of kidney showed clear signs of Bright's disease, a serious kidney ailment. This was the moment everything changed. This wasn't just a letter. This wasn't a prank. This came with physical evidence, and the evidence pointed directly to one of the Ripper's victims. Catherine Eddowes had been murdered on September 30th. This was part of the so-called double event, when the killer murdered 2 women, Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes, in a single night. Eddowes' body had been mutilated in a particularly gruesome way. The killer had taken her uterus and her left kidney. The police surgeon who performed her autopsy, Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown, had noted the removal of the left kidney. He also reported that Catherine Eddowes had suffered from Bright's disease. The details matched perfectly. The kidney sent to Lusk was a human left kidney. It was diseased in the same way as Catherine Eddowes' kidney. The letter arrived about 2 weeks after her murder, which fit the timeline of it being preserved for a while. Suddenly, the From Hell letter felt terrifyingly real. It seemed to be the one true communication from the killer. Unlike all the other letters, this one had proof. It was a trophy, a piece of the victim sent to taunt the very people who were trying to catch him. So, what did this letter really mean? It meant several things, each more disturbing than the last. First, it was a direct challenge. George Lusk and his vigilance committee were seen as rivals to the police. They were amateurs, citizens trying to do a professional's job. By sending the kidney to Lusk, the killer was mocking him. He wasn't just playing games with the police anymore, he was targeting a specific person, a community leader. The message was clear: you think you can stop me? Here's a piece of my work, hold it in your hands, know that I am real, and you are powerless. And it was an act of supreme arrogance and contempt. He was telling them that not only could he kill whenever he wanted, he could also choose his audience for the aftermath. Second, the letter and its contents meant the killer likely had some anatomical knowledge. Removing a kidney from a body in the dark, in a public square, in a matter of minutes is not easy. You have to know where to cut. You have to be quick and precise. The surgeons who examined Eddowes' body were impressed by the skill shown. This wasn't a random hack-and-slash job. The organ was removed cleanly. This fueled theories that the killer might be a doctor, a surgeon, or maybe a butcher or a slaughterman. Someone comfortable with anatomy and the use of a knife. The letter reinforced this idea. The sender knew exactly what he had taken. He identified it as a kidney and even specified which part he sent. Third, the letter gave a horrifying insight into the killer's psychology. The tone is completely different from the Dear Boss letter. Dear Boss is almost playful, a jaunty ghoul writing to the authorities. It has a certain dark humor. The From Hell letter has no humor at all. It is blunt, crude, and visceral. The opening, From Hell, is not a joke. It's a statement of identity. It suggests the writer sees himself as a demon, an entity from another world of pain and suffering. Then there is the most disturbing line of all, "T'other piece I fried and ate, it was very nice." Cannibalism. Whether he actually did it or not is impossible to know, but the claim itself is a profound statement. Killing was not enough. Mutilating the body was not enough. He was claiming to have consumed part of his victim. This is the ultimate act of possession and dehumanization. It reduces a human being to mere meat. It's an act of total contempt, not just for the victim, but for all of humanity. It suggests a mind that is not just angry or vengeful, but completely broken, operating on a level of depravity that was almost unimaginable. It moved the killer from the category of a murderer to the category of a monster. So the letter meant the killer was confident, knowledgeable, and deeply pathologically disturbed. It was a message designed to create maximum terror, and it worked. The story of the kidney sent through the mail spread like wildfire. London was already gripped by fear. This pushed the panic to a new level. The Ripper wasn't just a shadow in the alleys anymore. He was a phantom who could reach into your home, through your letterbox, and force you to confront his work. But there is another side to this story. Was the letter in the kidney truly from the killer? The debate has raged for over a century. We have to look at the arguments against it being genuine. The main counter-argument is that it was a highly sophisticated hoax. The idea is that someone, perhaps a medical student, orchestrated the whole thing. The medical students in Victorian London had a reputation for grim pranks. They had access to bodies and organs in dissecting rooms. It would have been possible for a student to get a human kidney, specifically one with Bright's disease, from a hospital or a medical school. The hoaxer would have needed some information. They would have needed to know that Catherine Eddowes' left kidney was taken. This detail wasn't a huge secret, but it wasn't on the front page of every newspaper either. Still, information leaked. It's possible a journalist or a student heard a rumor or got a tip from a police officer or a hospital porter. Then, they would have had to write the letter in a semi-literate style and send it off to George Lusk, the most prominent Ripper hunter outside of the police. It's a plausible scenario. The problem with this theory is the level of detail. The hoaxer had to get a human kidney. It had to be a left kidney. It had to be from someone with Bright's disease. And they had to time it correctly. That's a lot of things to get right just for a prank. The odds seem long. Some police officials at the time were skeptical. The chief commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Charles Warren, seemed to think it was a hoax. He believed it was a trick by medical students to embarrass the police. Other officers, like Chief Inspector Swanson and Robert Anderson, the head of the CID, seemed to believe it was genuine, or they felt it was the only communication that carried any weight. So even at the time, the authorities were divided. The evidence itself, the kidney, is long gone. It was examined, and then it disappeared. We can't perform modern DNA tests on it. We can't re-examine it with modern forensic techniques. All we have are the reports from 1888. This lack of physical evidence means the debate can never be truly settled. It will always be a matter of belief, of weighing the probabilities. So let's assume for a moment that it was real. What does that tell us about the Ripper and the end of his murder spree? The From Hell letter was received in mid-October. The last canonical Ripper murder, that of Mary Jane Kelly, happened on November 9th. Kelly's murder was the most horrific of all. The killer had hours to do his work indoors, and the mutilations were extreme. After that, the murder stopped. If the From Hell letter was from the killer, it shows an escalating pattern of behavior. He wasn't just killing, he was performing. He was creating a public narrative. First, he gives himself a name with the Dear Boss letter, or someone does it for him, and he adopts it. Then he sends a physical trophy with the From Hell letter, taking a piece of his victim and using it to taunt his pursuers. Finally, with Mary Kelly, he creates his masterpiece of horror, a slaughter so complete it was barely recognizable as human. Perhaps after that, he felt he had achieved whatever he set out to do. The psychological game, the taunts, the terror had reached their peak. Maybe he died or was imprisoned for another crime or simply decided to stop. The From Hell letter, in this context, is a key part of his evolution. It marks the moment he moved from being just a killer to being an active participant in his own myth. He was no longer content to let the newspapers tell the story. He wanted to write it himself, in blood and ink. Now, let's assume it was a hoax. What does that mean? It means that in the middle of a real-life horror story, someone else injected a piece of fiction that was so powerful, so compelling, that it has become central to the case. It means that the image we have of the Ripper, the taunting monster who ate his victim's organs, might be based on a lie. A sick joke performed by a clever and morbid prankster. This doesn't make the murders themselves any less real or horrific, but it changes our understanding of the killer. If the letter is a fake, then the Ripper himself might have been a silent figure. A man who killed and disappeared back into the London fog, never trying to communicate with the world. The taunting, theatrical personality we associate with him might have been created entirely by the press and by hoaxers. In a way, this is just as unsettling. It means the terror of 1888 had two sources: a real, brutal killer, and a society that was so obsessed with the story that it began adding its own ghoulish chapters. The From Hell letter could be the ultimate example of this. It's a piece of collaborative fiction, a myth created in the heat of a panic. So, we are left with two possibilities. One, the letter is genuine. It means Jack the Ripper was a killer of incredible audacity and depravity. He saw his crimes as a form of communication. He wanted to instill not just fear, but a profound sense of violation. He sent a piece of a woman to George Lusk to say, "I own this city, I own life and death, I can even reach into your home." It was a declaration of power. The ultimate meaning of the letter was that the rules of society did not apply to him. He was operating from a place beyond human morality, a place he called hell. 2. The letter is a hoax. It means someone, unconnected to the murders, saw an opportunity to become part of the biggest story in the world. They used their medical knowledge to craft the perfect piece of evidence, a clue so convincing that it fooled many and is still debated today. The meaning, in this case, is about the nature of fear and media frenzies. It shows how, in an atmosphere of terror, it's possible for fiction to become fact. It becomes a reflection not of the killer's mind, but of the public's worst fears. The hoaxer gave a shape to the monster everyone was imagining. Personally, I lean towards it being genuine. The combination of details, the left kidney, Bright's disease, the timing, the anatomical skill shown in the removal, it feels like too much for a hoaxer to get right by chance. The tone of the letter, so different from the others, also feels authentic in its raw ugliness. It doesn't feel performative in the same way as Dear Boss. It feels like a direct transmission from a disturbed mind. But we can't be certain. And that is the key. The From Hell letter endures for the same reason the Jack the Ripper case endures. It is an unsolvable puzzle. It sits right on the edge of belief. It is just plausible enough to be real and just strange enough to be a hoax. Its true meaning, then, might not be about what the killer intended. Its meaning is what it did to the story. It cemented the legend of Jack the Ripper. It transformed him from a common murderer into a diabolical figure, a bogeyman who taunts from the shadows. Without the From Hell letter, he is a brutal but anonymous killer. With it, he has a voice, a personality, and a chilling philosophy. The letter meant that the killer was not just taking lives, he was taking control of the narrative. He was forcing London to see the murders through his eyes. The piece of kidney was not just a clue, it was a prop and a horrifying piece of theater. It forced everyone, from George Lusk to the doctors, to the police, and the public, to be unwilling actors in this play. In the end, the From Hell letter meant that the barrier between the killer and society had been broken. He was no longer just out there in the streets. He had found a way into their minds, and that, more than anything else, is why we still talk about it. The simple, badly spelled note and the pathetic piece of human flesh in a box represented a new kind of terror. It was intimate, personal, and aimed right at the heart of a terrified city. It was a message from a monster, and its meaning was simple: I am here, and you will never forget me.